Sportscaster Bob Costas had some choice words for the mainstream media, who he thinks have not been tough enough when covering Trump 2.0. Costas singled out many news outlets, including ABC News, CBS News and CNN, at this year's Mirror Awards in New York. Here's Costas taking a jab at the state of the media under the current Trump administration.
It does not mean that the legacy or mainstream media doesn't screw up from time to time or have blind spots or misplaced narratives. But if the answer to that is MAGA media, if the answer to that is Donald Trump's view of the world, which is only through a prism of what benefits him, there are no higher ideals, there are no principles at work other than what benefits him, I'll stay with where we are without correction if the correction is what Donald Trump represents.
Costas then went on to criticize ABC News for settling a lawsuit that stemmed from comments by its host, George Stephanopoulos. Let's watch.
His FCC intimidated ABC into refuting George Stephanopoulos. All they should have said was, George misspoke. The president, that paragon of virtue, was only found guilty of sexual assault, not rape. So we stand corrected. They didn't have to pay a $15 million ransom.
Costas also condemned Paramount, which is controlled by Shari Redstone. Let's watch that.
Did Shari Redstone, because she wants to affect a merger that Trump's FCC could stand in the way of, did she have to besmirch and undercut the gold standard in our lifetime of broadcast journalism, 60 Minutes? Paying $20 million in ransom to Trump is just the cost of doing business when there's billions of dollars at stake. These are ongoing assaults on the basic idea of a free press.
Well, I'm happy to defend Bob Costas, which I suspect you're not going to do, but I think firstly, I think he's a great broadcaster. I think he's really one of the best. But secondly, I think he's largely right in what he said there, particularly in relation to the Paramount case and in relation to the idea that the media is some media outlets, I should say, are too timid in calling out Trump's overreach or creeping authoritarianism. Now, the ABC case is much more debatable because what George Stephanopoulos said about Trump wasn't correct. He said that he had been found liable, of rape, and he had been found liable of sexual assault. ABC could have defended that or could have gone to court on it and said what Costas had suggested, but it would still have been putting them in the place of defending a false statement. And I don't think as a broadcaster or as any other news organisation, you want to do that. You want to be put in that position. They did give $15 million as a settlement, which seems rather large. But in terms of Paramount, they certainly, in my view, shouldn't settle his what I consider ridiculous $20 billion suit over the CBS interview of Kamala Harris. We've spoken about that interview before. I think we have divergent views on it. I think that 60 Minutes did completely routine condensing of answers for time purposes. Trump makes different allegations. I don't think Paramount should settle that. I think it would be a ridiculous surrender if they did. And I think that the many elements of the media should be stronger in their criticisms of Trump.
It's definitely true that Paramount is seeking to settle that case in part because they have this merger that they want approved by the Trump administration. As you mentioned, the ABC News lawsuit is obviously much different, but I obviously don't feel like the media has been pulling its punches on Trump, and I'm kind of curious where you get that impression. I mean, I do my media diet every morning as I look at the home pages of the New York Times, of the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and other mainstream outlets, and I find the coverage to be overwhelmingly negative about the Trump administration.
I don't know. Firstly, I wouldn't necessarily describe it as overwhelmingly negative, but I think the failing, and I think this is what Costas was addressing, was in a joining of the dots about various things or an emphasis on the degree to which Trump is an aberrational president, in my view. So, I mean, there's a list of things that you could cite there. I actually had to write some of them down to remind myself. So he has attacked judges hundreds of times, called for their impeachment. He has defied the courts for weeks on Kilmore Abrego Garcia. He fired a prosecutor who told the truth in that case. sued 60 Minutes for $20 billion for doing something that is just standard practice. He punished law firms for representing opponents of his. He has tried to take away their business. He has sent Venezuelans to El Salvador under the Alien Enemies Act, a law that requires an invasion by a foreign government, which has not happened. And on and on and on. In addition to things like the meme coin, which are mechanisms by which people can buy influence with the President of the United States. He has complained about his predecessor's family's business dealings, while the Trump organization has done real estate deals that have had an involvement from the governments of Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia. We could continue on. He is an aberrational figure.
I feel like the media has covered all of that, though. I mean, if I just do a Google search for authoritarian from the Washington Post website, I immediately get multiple articles from this year. What America could look like a decade from now. Political scientists and historians weigh in on authoritarianism's impact on the U.S. They fled authoritarian countries. Here's what they're experiencing now in the United States. Under Trump, the authoritarian age comes into focus.
Yeah.
Even in February of last year, how Trump is becoming more authoritarian. In the age of Trump, global authoritarianism continues its rise. The increasingly authoritarian, curious Republican Party. I mean, that only took me 5 seconds to find.
Sure.
I think all of this has been repeatedly covered by the media.
But people you're arguing there that the Washington Post is representative of the media,
Well, I'm
which
giving
is
an example. I could do the New York
but I
Times,
mean,
too.
there are all sorts of other organizations that have not. I mean, have the major broadcasters, for example, had that amount of focus? I think that Fox News obviously has run defense for Trump on a lot of these things. We'll get to one instance of those later. But the point that Costas is emphasizing is the, as I say, aberrational nature of the Trump presidency. I think that is something that there is deserving of more coverage rather than less.
Gosh, I think there's so much already. I'm really
I don't think there's
shocked.
enough. We differ on this one at least.
Definitely, yeah. I'm not even sure what else to say. I just think our view of the media is so fundamentally different.
Possibly. I mean, I just think that, I think that our views of the Trump presidency are fundamentally different, and that may be something that is fueling our difference in our view of this topic. The dangers of the Trump presidency seem to me to be severe. I think he's easily the most dangerous president of my lifetime. And I was born in the dying days of the Richard Nixon presidency, so that's how old I am. I think that he has, Costas's view beyond media coverage was the President of the United States has absolutely no regard and in fact has contempt for basic American principles and basic common decency. I think that is a correct assessment. And I think some of the things I cited, and we could go further on through that list, are evidence of it.
I'll ask you a different question just because we obviously aren't
disagree.
going to find an area of agreement on that. But do you think that the media's overwhelmingly negative coverage of Trump back in 2016, particularly in their acceptance of the idea that he had colluded with Russia to win the election and a lot of that coming unraveled, particularly the Steele dossier, do you think that really damaged their ability to get their viewers or listeners or readers to accept their sort of, I would describe them as hyperbolic, you would describe them as accurate depictions of the Trump presidency?
Let me answer that as honestly as I can. I think that some coverage of the Russia stuff was plainly overblown, and I think that did damage the media's credibility. And I think there have been other things that have damaged the media's credibility. Costas said in those remarks that we played that he acknowledged some mistakes on the media's part, but I think he said if the corrective was Trump, he doesn't want that corrective, which would be basically where I came down on that. Now, without getting back through the whole weeds of the Russia investigation, Mueller came out with his report, which was more equivocal than, say, Bill Barr portrayed it as in the immediate presentation of those facts. The broader point I would make, Amber, is that where I think we differ on those is that I think there has been a decades-long attempt to discredit the conventional media by conservatives who believe it's overly liberal.
Okay, all right, up next.
It's the battle of the influencers, and one is wielding immigration and customs enforcement as a weapon. That's next on Rising.